Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome back to the Brampton Observatory. We are live tonight for a little bit. It's been a while since I've been able to get some decent weather to come on and do a live broadcast. Again, unfortunately, I won't be able to stay on too long tonight, but I thought I'd pop in for a few minutes and give you a little look at what I'm looking at tonight. And we are looking at, right now, the Wizard Nebula, which just did a 180-second exposure on. The camera is cooled down to 5 degrees Fahrenheit, so about minus 15 Celsius. And we're going to have a quick look at this guy for a few minutes, then we'll move on to a few other targets that are out tonight. Notably the North American Nebula, which is really pretty spectacular, quite high in the sky right now. And I'm going to come back and start imaging some of these targets, probably in the next couple of weeks as things get better. You can see the massive star field that sort of encompasses the nebula. And of course, this is all just live, no processing whatsoever, and we could do a live stack on it, and perhaps we'll do that another time, and it'll actually build up the image and data around it. But I thought I'd look at some different targets that are in the sky right now, and some night where we'll do a longer broadcast and hopefully do a bunch of Messier targets as winter comes up. There's a lot of really cool Messier targets, including one of my favorites, the Andromeda Galaxy, which right now is just not in a good position. It kind of sits just below some trees, but that will change in the coming month or so, and we'll be able to get a good look at Andromeda and some of the other galaxies as well. Also thought we'd have a look tonight at the double cluster. I did actually do a list of targets, which you can see up here now. And right now, Andromeda's way up here. And I'm not sure if I can get it or not because this tree is actually quite high, but we may take a shot at it here just before we sign off. Like I say, not going to be a long time tonight, but hopefully we'll get a few targets in before I have to close down. We do have NGC 7317, which is way on up there, which is an elliptical galaxy, so maybe we'll see if we can get that next. And let's do that. So we're going to go to NGC 7317. Search that out. And this is great software. Just enter in the name. And we'll slew on over to that. The telescope is on the move. And I'm going to turn me off here for a little while so you don't have to look at me. And there I go. So right now the telescope is, as you can see, auto-centering. So this is all done with what they call plate solving, and really a fantastic method for getting your objects all lined up, especially when you're doing astrophotography. So we have a centered object. As usual, the stars will be pretty wacky here at first. And we have absolutely nothing, but that's likely a histogram. So we'll fix that up. right now you really can't see much of anything at all, but let's try 180-second exposure and see if we can bring out some galactic details here. My guiding tonight is passable. It's pretty bright moon right now, so the sky is not optimal for astro imaging. However, for some outreach stuff like I'm doing right now, what we call EAA, electronically assisted astronomy, in that capacity is actually not too bad for that. So while we're waiting, let's have a look at some of the other targets that I had in mind tonight. NGC 281, unfortunately I tried a little earlier. It's actually quite low in the sky. The double cluster, which is a beautiful visual astronomy target as well, I think it may be a little low. Again, I have this tree right up here, so I think that's probably going to block it out. And you can see the moon is rising in the eastern sky here, and that is definitely not optimal for imaging in general, but we will persevere and get as many targets as we can here tonight. And we have about 78 seconds. Guiding, actually, which is what you can see up here, there's a separate camera on the telescope that's actually locked onto some stars, actually multiple stars, and it is helping to guide and make corrections to the mount in the telescope so that you get a better image and more stable image in terms of guiding. We're using the still RASA 8 inch telescope, which of course I think if you've looked at any of my videos you've seen. Still waiting for the big 14-inch Celestron Edge HD to come back from Celestron. It is being repaired. Unfortunately, it takes a while, and I was really hoping to have that telescope back before we get into the winter months. So it is possible that the telescope may come back, but have not seen it up to this point, and Celestron hasn't given me any indication as to where I am in the queue at the moment for repairs, so hopefully soon. Okay, so we did get our galaxy, but also unfortunately, we also, I'm going to turn myself back on here. I've lowered the big red lights to make it a little darker. Unfortunately, we also got a big satellite through the image. But you can see the galaxy here. It's a very faint, distant galaxy, and not visually spectacular to look at, but how many times can you look up in the sky and see a galaxy? Especially in our light polluted skies, it is problematic at best to see much of anything anymore in our skies at night. So that was 180-second exposure, so we're not going to stay on this target for a long time. Again, I'll kind of zoom it in a bit here. And you can see the galaxy. Again, this is a one shot. There would be a lot more detail with multiple stacked images, and that would certainly make it a more pleasing image to look at. This is a very rough, raw image, if you will, and but you can see the bright core of the galaxy and a little bit of the spiral arms out here, And there are some other galaxies that we're going to look at in the not too distant future that are much more defined and look much better, obviously, in the image, such as Andromeda, M33, the Triangulum galaxies. I was kind of hoping for Stephan's quartet here tonight, which is, I think, still a little bit low. Just have a quick look here. Well, this is actually Stephan's quartet, which is a group of galaxies. But in this bright moonlight, we're obviously not getting much of an image here for multiple galaxies. Try to turn the histogram up a little more black point and see if we get anything to show up in there. Not really, unfortunately. Would be actually a good image for us to do live stacking on with multiple images and kind of build the image up so that you could see a little better. Our guiding is getting a little wonky as well, I see, but still passable. So let's take a look at something, see if we can see something a wee bit better. Well, let's have a look over here, see what else may be interesting. Of course, one of the problems is if you look at where this is positioned, it's really going to get a lot of that moonlight. We're just a little past full moon, but it's still extremely bright. The best time actually to image or do much in the world of imaging, certainly in broadband images, which means the spectrum of all colors, is new moon. When the moon is in the new moon phase, it's very dark, or if you happen to not be like myself in Bortle 8 skies here in North Brampton. Fortunately, I'm not like downtown or in Mississauga or Toronto, but it's still very bright here with light pollution, and it's just got worse over the years, unfortunately. So you can see this software is actually called Starry Night Pro, and Starry Night Pro is a paid software. There is, I think I've mentioned many times before, free planetary software out there, such as Stellarium, and there's a few others out there that are actually pretty good as well. I always suggest to people, if you're just getting started and you really don't want to pay for this type of software, go out, download Stellarium. It's free, and it allows for telescope control, and has a really good core of planetarium software built into it for searching and looking at the night sky. You can actually put your own panorama in here as well, like I've done in Starry Night Pro. You can do it in there as well, so that you can see where things are in your own backyard. So we've looked at the Wizard, we've looked at the Stephan's Quartet, which again is not very good tonight. Unfortunately, I apologize for that. We can have a look at M27. Always a fun target to look at. M27, also known as the Dumbbell Nebula, and you'll see why after we target it here. Dumbbell Nebula actually is viewable with a good set of binoculars or small telescope as well. Let's just see. Okay, everything's good here. We're still tracking in sidereal. So let's go out and have a look at M27. And as you can see, M27 is actually pretty high in the sky. It's a magnitude 7.4, so it's actually a pretty bright object. Telescope is just slewing over there now. Not sure if there's anyone with me tonight. I didn't obviously announce this live stream tonight. It was kind of impromptu. I was actually doing some testing, and I still have some fine tuning to do on this particular telescope I can see. And let's just see if there's anyone out there. And where are we here? Still centering up. And of course we have to do a quick auto adjust on the histogram. And ta-da. So let's do, this is a bright object, so we don't want to blow it out too much. So let's take a shot with 60 seconds. You can start to see the beginnings of it. By 4,176. And we're about 30 seconds out from the image coming in. Four, three, two, one. Liftoff. So there we go. We should get our image now. And we'll have to adjust that histogram again. And I see we have another satellite trail in here. And we are starting to get, you can see this reddish area. That's kind of due again to the full moon. I do have a narrowband filter on here. The Optolong L-Enhance is the one I have on tonight, which does knock out a lot of the light pollution, but certainly not as much as I would like. Let's see what we got with 60 seconds. We'll zoom in here a bit. Oops. There we go. So 60 seconds is probably too much. Let's try a little bit shorter exposure here. Let's try 30 seconds. So the Optolong filter that I just mentioned, what it does is it really blocks out all but certain spectrums of light. The spectrum of light that you want to come in for this particular and some of the other objects that I've been imaging is H alpha, O3, and oxygen 3, and a little bit of H beta. H beta is really not a very prevalent gas in the universe, so you don't get a lot from that. Well, that's a little better. But H alpha predominantly shows as red, and the oxygen 3 kind of shows as green. And let's just see if we can get a closer up shot of that. So what we have here is a planetary nebula. So this is actually what's going to happen to our own sun. In a few billion years, when the sun burns out, it's going to become a red giant, of course, and then it'll just basically blow off its shell and into space, and what you'll have at the center is a white dwarf. And if you look really carefully, unfortunately tonight is not the best night for this, right here where the arrow is the actual star, the white dwarf, that's causing all this. And you can see it's expanding gas, and if you kind of turn on an angle here a bit, you can see why they call it the dumbbell nebula. It kind of looks like a set of dumbbells. It's also obviously known as Messier 27. Charles Messier discovered this object, and some of these objects have some really interesting names. We have like the Jellyfish Nebula. We have some really strange names for some of these. You always kind of want to wonder where they got their names. We got the Bubble Nebula and a whole pile of other interesting nebula out there that have been given rather interesting names. The Heart and Soul Nebula, the Rosette Nebula, the North American Nebula that we're going to go to in just a minute, and you'll kind of get a really good idea where some of these names come from, because obviously the objects kind of resemble the object that it's named after, like this one being the dumbbell. The Rosette looks like a rose growing kind of thing. California Nebula looks a little bit like the state of California, etc., etc. So if you are going out and you get out there into the night sky and start to do some astronomy, much like the constellations, which also are named after interesting patterns in the sky, like the Orion Nebula, the Orion Nebula, which is the constellation of Orion. Just checking to see if there was anyone online with me here. Not yet. Okay, well, hopefully you'll all watch this later on. We'll stay on for about another half hour, maybe a little less. You can hear aircraft buzzing overhead. That can also be a definite pain when it comes to doing astronomy. Getting a big airliner crossing your path will put a big streak in the image. So let's go out and take a look at the North American Nebula, which is also known as NGC 7000. NGC just stands for New Galactic Catalog. So we'll do a go-to here. And right now, as you can see, NGC 7000, North American Nebula, is actually pretty high up in the sky. As a matter of fact, it is pretty much at zenith. Not quite, but almost. And just a little bit below the summer triangle. We may take one shot at M31 here just before I sign off. Tonight. And it's just loading that image now. So looks pretty much like nothing at the moment, with just a quick 10-second shot. 10 seconds is nowhere near enough time to bring out the nebula itself. So this one we're actually going to do 180 seconds on, and we should get a pretty darn good image of the North American Nebula with that amount of time. I see actually a couple of people online broadcasting tonight, and that's a great thing. That there we go. And yeah, so this is a really great target in the sky. You can see with the telescope it's a very large target, so it makes it a lot easier to actually find it and see it in the night sky. In very, very, very dark skies, Bortle 1, Bortle 2 skies, you can actually see this nebula visually to some degree. In heavily light polluted skies like I'm in and many, many of you are in, you do need a good telescope and or a really good camera. Although you can start out these days, actually iPhone cameras and a decent telescope will get you some really great images. I've seen some really amazing stuff coming out with just iPhone adapters on telescopes. The technology is getting better. Obviously, I have a dedicated astronomy camera. I actually have several dedicated astronomy cameras. And hopefully over the winter we can do some solar observing. I do have a telescope and a setup for doing solar observing, and we are coming into solar max right now. So it would be pretty cool to take a look at the sun and some sunspots and maybe some prominences if we can see them. So hopefully we get that set up over the winter as well. Right now I'm just focused on waiting to get the big Edge HD back from repair, and it should be bright and shiny. My mount is behaving okay at the moment. As I say, I'm using the 8-inch Rasa at the moment. And the Rasa is a great little telescope. The 8-inch is not really a high-end scientific level instrument like the 14-inch Edge HD that I use with the Hyperstar. But hey, it does the trick. And until I get that other telescope back, it is my primary. So I'm actually very fortunate to have it. And fortunate to have it observatory as well. I'm sitting in my control room right now. It's warm. I'm sheltered from the outside. And that's one of the biggest problems with observing in the winter, obviously. Oh, there we go. That came out actually pretty darn good. Yeah, pleased with that. Didn't have to do much adjustment on the histogram. I'm going to knock that out of there. Oops, we have fire trucks en route somewhere. So, okay, if you're looking at this, you can immediately tell why it's called the North American Nebula. It is kind of tilted on its side here because of the angle I'm viewing it on with the camera. But as you can see, well, hey, it looks like North America. And as I say, this is a pretty big nebula. Out there, it is comprised mostly of hydrogen gas. And there is some other nebulosity around it. just actually, I'm pointing with my finger, that's not much use. Down here you can see more nebulosity, and you can see the North American shape. You can see sort of the Gulf of Mexico, and Florida would be kind of down here. This would be the eastern United States, western United States, California, etc., going on up towards Canada and Alaska and some of the other ways. So obviously there's a lot more detail. Let's see if we can darken it up just a bit here. Yeah, that's a little better. There's a lot more detail to be had when you stack many, many images together and compile hours and hours of data to put together, and then you build up that image and eliminate a lot of the crazy noise that you see in here right now. You also see a bit of a green tinge in the image. That green tinge is actually the filter that's on the camera itself right now, the L-Enhance filter. That green comes out of the image when you get into the image processing side of things. You would remove that. And there's a couple of ways in PixInsight and Photoshop and a few of the other softwares. I predominantly use PixInsight to process. It is a paid software. A lot of people use strictly Photoshop. I tend to do some of the cleanup work in the images in Photoshop. There's some features in Photoshop that I really like that are not spectacular in PixInsight. But certainly for the primary processing of the image, PixInsight is the software of choice for me. It is a big software and complex, and it does require a learning curve, but there are plenty of online tutorials, both paid and unpaid. There's a company out there on the internet called Masters of PixInsight, and they have various classes every month or two on different levels of learning for the program. Really well worth it. They're really fairly inexpensive. It's about $35 US and per module, and that gives you access to all the videos and the live actual teaching as well. So if you do get into it and you decide to go with PixInsight for your processing, definitely check it out. It's Masters of PixInsight, and there's a local guy here in Ontario, Ron Breacher, who is definitely a master of PixInsight. He knows more about this program than most people will ever know, and how to use it, and he frequently does the tutorials, both live and recorded, so well worth looking at. So anyway, that is our friend the North American Nebula. Pretty spectacular to see, and I'm a hound for punishment. I'm actually gonna try M31 and see if we can see it. You can see the moon is rising now, and this is the bottom part of my house. Obviously the roof is much higher. It looks, yeah, I'm probably not going to get it, but we'll give it a shot. Why not? We're out here anyway, right? So that's going to be M31. Oops, my friend Chuck in the US is broadcasting at the moment, or has a short out anyway. So M31, the Andromeda, it's called the Andromeda Nebula. It's actually a galaxy, but they still have it named under the Andromeda Nebula, and that's because when it was first discovered by Messier, it's a Messier object, it was actually, up until the time of Edwin Hubble, believed to be a nebula. within our own galaxy. Of course, that changed, and when Mr. Hubble detected the redshift and measured the distance, he quickly came to the conclusion that this is a galaxy and not something residing in our own galaxy, and definitely not a nebula. So, on that note, let's see if we can get it. This is also in a very like Bortle 1, Bortle 2 level sky visual target that you can see. With a small telescope you can see it. With actually a good pair of binoculars you can see it, even in relatively light polluted skies. So as we move into position here, let's have a quick look if anyone's on with us. Nope. Actually move that over to here. We'll know in a second. Well, we'll know in a second after I adjust the histogram, that is. I see a few stars. Okay, well, it is visible, so that's kind of good. Let's do 120 seconds on this one. It's one of the difficult things with this particular galaxy is not to blow out the core of the galaxy, which means just generally, there I go with my fingers again, not to have this bright part too bright and overwhelm the rest of the image. It's actually good that this is getting higher in the sky. Be able to do some imaging. I love imaging this galaxy. It can be a challenge. There's no doubt about that, even though it's a very large galactic target. Much like the Whirlpool Nebula and some of the others, or Whirlpool Galaxy, I should say. And some of the other galaxies can be a challenge as well. M33, M106, which is another galaxy, can also be imaging challenge, but we're up to that. So these are all targets that we're going to do, that I'm going to try to do over the winter. And hopefully, there goes my lights. They're on a timer. Let's get those back. So I've got about 46 seconds left on this. I'm not sure how good this is going to turn out because of all the light pollution we're getting right now, and on top of it the pretty much full moon. But we will have a look and see in about 24 seconds. This is a great little part of this software as well, the ASI Air software. So this is not the image, by the way. This is internal software that shows you basically, with the way your camera is turned in the telescope, what your image will look like. These are actually two satellite galaxies that are going around M31 and M32 here, that go around the central M31 going around the central galaxy, right? These are actually quite bright as well, and you can see this is the angle my camera is on. Red indicates my target, and this is the rotation of the camera itself. So okay, well, kind of a weird angle for it, for sure. I think I'll change the angle of the camera next time I'm out. But let's try to darken that up a bit. you can already see, okay, well, we're getting there. So stick with me. I think I'm going to do a 180-second image. You can definitely, I'm just going to turn off the histogram for a second here, begin to see, even just with this 1-2 minute image, the outline of the galaxy, the core of the galaxy, some of the dust lanes within the galaxy. You can see the satellite galaxy out here. So pretty neat stuff. But I definitely will be rotating that camera around a bit, I think. This is kind of an odd angle. I would have to rotate the image vertically to get a true picture. So I think I want to get it a little more angled to the right, the camera. So I'll rotate that tomorrow. But for tonight, hey, it's good. Yeah, let's try 180-second exposure and see what we get here. You can see that bright core. This galaxy is actually on a collision course with us. Not to frighten you, because it won't happen for billions of years. But our two galaxies, the Milky Way and Andromeda, are likely to collide with each other at some point. It would actually be a pretty amazing thing to see in the night sky as that collision is occurring. And actually, there are scientists out there now who believe we are already started, the outer gases of our two galaxies have already started to interact, and we're already begun that collision with Andromeda. And likely not much will happen when the two galaxies do collide. The distance between stars is vast, so you're not going to have stars for the most part colliding with each other. We will then become the Milkdromeda galaxy. And after some time and after a lot of gravitational interaction, we'll settle down to become a galaxy that looks nothing like either one of the two galaxies right now. We'll become an elliptical galaxy, which is really kind of just a blob for the most part of all the stars together. The spiral formations that we see now from these two galaxies from our own, obviously the Milky Way and Andromeda, those shapes will be pretty much gone. If any of you have seen some of the James Webb Space Telescope, the JWST images of galaxies, some of these elliptical galaxies, you would see what I mean. And if you want to go look it up later, just do a Google search for elliptical galaxies, or post-collision galaxies, or galaxies actually in collision. Some pretty spectacular images by the Hubble Space Telescope have been taken of like the antenna galaxies, which are two galaxies in collision. So we're about 27 seconds out. This will be a great target to do. This is really a broadband target. I'm using an H-alpha filter, which will bring out the H-alpha channels and H-alpha gases, I should say, within the galaxy. But really, it's a broadband target. So you could just use a light pollution filter with this, like an L-Pro filter made by Optolong as well, which lets all of the spectra of color in. But you would definitely not want to do it on a night like tonight. So this is going to be pretty blown out. But let's go back to our histogram. Do it auto to start with. And yeah, definitely starting to see more detail. Let's bring the black point down. Yeah, a little more. And a little more still. So I'm really kind of increasing the darkness here so you can sort of see a little better. Turn off the histogram. And yeah, you can see some dust lane detail here. Again, this is just one 3-minute image. I would probably do several hours worth of data on this galaxy, especially when you get out into the outer spiral arms that are out here and out here. They can get actually pretty faint, so you do need a lot of data, and you can see some of the light pollution here beginning to interfere even with it as the moon is rising higher here in the sky. But again, not a bad image. We can zoom into that a little bit, and you can see those dust lanes and that big bright central core of stars. That's not one star, that's probably millions of stars. Andromeda is much bigger than the Milky Way galaxy. So when it comes down to the collision between the two, and the Milky Way has had many collisions, we believe, over its lifetime with other galaxies, but it has been the big contender on the block, so it's managed to pretty much swallow up those other galaxies. We see evidence of that. The Large Magellanic Cloud, which of course unfortunately we cannot see, either the large or the small Magellanic Clouds from our far north latitude here in Canada, but in places like New Zealand, Australia, and then the southern continents, you can. And that's basically evidence of galactic collisions. Also, there's a big arc that's been fairly recently discovered, that comes out of the top of our galaxy, which we believe is remnants of another galaxy that we collided with. And we think that because the stars are actually going in the opposite direction than the orbit of most of the stars in our galaxy. So that would indicate this is an alien galaxy that we more or less swallowed up. In Andromeda's case, however, Andromeda being the bigger galaxy, it will pretty much swallow us up, or at least it'll be a draw to some degree, and we'll kind of devour each other in the galactic terms. So that's Andromeda, everyone. We will get some better looks at this through the winter months when it's a little higher in the sky, and not even so much higher in the sky so much as better night in terms of light pollution. My guiding here, because of the moon, is kind of off a little bit, but again, still usable. Let's see, is there one more target before we close out tonight that I want to try to get? I don't think we're going to get the double cluster. I would like to, but I don't think it's going to happen. NGC 869. And there's some information and a quick picture of the double cluster. This is one of my favorite night sky visual targets. It's just spectacular to see it through a telescope. I recommend, once you start doing astronomy and you're using your telescope, have a look at this double cluster. It's an open cluster of stars. It's not a globular cluster, but it is just beautiful to look at. It really is mesmerizing. I could stare at this cluster through my telescope all night long. It's just visually stunning. However, let's have a look. NGC 884. If we can get it, I'm not so sure. I think we may be a little too low. Oops, try to type here. And this will be our last target. We're coming up on 9:30 my time. Yeah, it's still pretty low. If I were to stay up till 2:24 in the morning, it would be actually quite high. Anyway, let's have a look and see if we can get it. I have a funny feeling the answer. I'm looking at the telescope. It's a it's a maybe. I have a funny feeling the tree is in the way. We will know briefly. And it's just loading up. And we're going to have to do the histogram. Well, you can sort of see it a little bit. All that blotchiness on the screen, sadly, is tree. So it is a bit low in the sky. I'm getting, and might be a little better when the leaves are gone. So I've just brought down the histogram and the black point on it, so you can start to see it a little bit. Here is the two clusters, which is why they call it the double cluster. You've got this one and this one. There are lots of different color stars in there as well. You can see some red stars. If you were not to have the filter on here in the trees, you'd see some bluish stars. Actually, I can see a blue star in here. The blue stars, of course, are very large stars. And it's, again, there's a big star field all around it as well. And just, like I said, stunning to look at. And visually, for visual astronomy, it's one of those targets that can hook you on astronomy as a hobby. That and some of the planets as well, Jupiter, Saturn. Saturn was definitely a big influence on me when I was young. And so, yeah, there you have it. We will get a better image of this another time, to be sure. But I recommend, even with a decent pair of binoculars, you can see this. Get out there, have a look at this cluster, and some of the other targets that we had a look at tonight as well. I do warn you in advance, the nebula in particular and the galaxies are not going to look like what you saw in my image. The human eye is not capable of rectifying those colors in those gases in those spectrum of light. So what you will see is kind of a gray or greenish blob or shape. So don't go in with the expectation if you're just doing visual astronomy. I mean, there's plenty of things out there that are spectacular and fun to look at. Even like the Orion Nebula in the wintertime, or really if you're up at like 4 a.m. in the morning right now as Orion is rising and moving across the early morning sky. But a lot of people get, you look at the pictures on the boxes of these Tasco, oops, did I say that? And other telescopes of low quality, and they have huge pictures of galaxies and nebula on them. And people sadly go in and think that's what they're going to see. Even with a large telescope, like my big 14-inch Edge HD, if I were to look through it visually, I would not see that color. There are some things where you will see a little bit of color, like the Pleiades, but again, it's going to be more kind of grayish, bluish color. You won't get that stark red color that you saw, for instance, on the North American Nebula. And I don't want that to discourage people from not getting into astronomy, because it's a very rewarding hobby. And, learning about the universe that we live in is important. We are just a small, as Carl Sagan said, pale blue dot in an ocean of stars. And sometimes it's great to look and just see how small we really are and how unique we may really be. With all the years of listening for alien signals out there, we've yet to detect anything that's provable as an alien signal or any proof whatsoever that there are other intelligent life forms out there. There may well be, there may not be, and if there isn't, then I'm going to get deep. We have a deep responsibility to look after this world that we live on, our starship Earth that's taking us through the cosmos. We orbit the galaxy, the center of the galaxy, every 200,000 years or so. We are roughly 26 light years from the center of the galaxy, where there's a supermassive black hole, Sagittarius A star, and we are a dot in the universe. Our galaxy is a dot in the universe. If you've ever looked at the Hubble Deep Field Image, if you haven't, I suggest you do so, and you'll just see how small we really are, but how potentially important we may really be in the greater scheme of things. If it is just us out there, some people may say it's an awful waste of space, but if it's just us in this galaxy, maybe alone, and maybe that's why we haven't heard from anyone or heard anyone out there, then really we have such a responsibility not to screw that up by politics and all the other craziness that's going on in the world right now. I typically don't get political in these broadcasts, and I'm not going to go further than that tonight. Let's just say that the universe is an amazing, wonderful thing, and we live in that universe. We live on Starship Earth that's taking us, as I said, through the cosmos, and we should learn to protect it at all costs, because really it's all we have, and it may be all we ever have. Anyway, on that note, I want to thank everyone who watches this video later on. Hopefully at some point I can announce when these videos are coming up. Sometimes it's a little impromptu, like tonight, and have some actual live interaction with people out there online. I'd love to do that and answer questions as best I can. Signing off from now at the Brampton Observatory. Thanks for tuning in and watching this video later. I do ask if you can possibly subscribe to the channel. It really helps me out to continue doing this and showing you guys the wonders of the night sky, and hopefully at some point, who knows, maybe we'll get together. Take care, everyone. Stay safe. Have a great night. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you again soon.